it's Justine. Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be creating 5 cards, and I'm going to be doing techniques that specifically focus on sets that include a stamp, die, and coordinating stencil. So I'm going to show you 5 ways on how you can use a coordinating stamp, die, and stencil in today's video, and I'm going to be using the Tailored Expressions new release. Not only am I going to be focusing on the 5 ways to do this, I'm also going to be giving you some Valentine's Day inspiration and a way to use your products in just a whole different way. So whether or not you own this specific stamp, die, and stencil set that was released today, or you want to use something that you have in your stash, come join me and make some cards and learn some techniques so you can get the most out of your projects. If you haven't subscribed yet, which I know at least half of you watching the video haven't, please click the subscribe button below. I would totally appreciate it. You can click the bell as well if you want to be notified when I go live and when I have new videos so you don't miss out on anything. Don't forget that all the supplies used in today's video are going to be in the video description below with links to stores in which you can purchase them. This is the brand new release from Tailored Expressions, and it doesn't matter which stamp, die, and stencil set that you have in your stash, you can follow along with this video, or of course you can just use it to gain some inspiration to see if stencil, stamp, and die are worth it for your stash. Let's dive into the different techniques. Diving straight into our first technique is called Stencil Coloring. This is the card we're going to be making today, and you can see that the outline around the stamp is not affected by the coloring done within the stamp. And I'm going to show you how to get this done. So I'm going to use my Misty stamping tool, and I'm going to ink up with Flirty Fuchsia, Party Dress, and Samba inks from Catherine Pooler. Now, if you want to ensure that you're not going to make a mistake, because you're going to need to keep this paper in place, and you can see I'm not using any magnets because I'm taking my chance. You can cut your paper to be longer than what your intended background is so that you can actually keep your magnet on the paper. Because I'm using a piece of paper that is smaller than my stamp, there's no way that I can use the magnet without it affecting my background. So just cut your paper a little bit longer or wider, and you can use your magnet to keep it in place. Because right now, it's really important that you don't move your card panel. I'm going to wash off my stamp with some squeaky clean Brutus Monroe stamp cleaner, which I absolutely love because it smells really good, and it doesn't smell like gross chemicals. And I'm going to wipe it with a microfiber cloth, and I'm going to now ink it up using some embossing ink from scrapbook.com. Versamark ink will do as well. Now, if you want to be able to skip this step here, because I'm going to add embossing powder on top, you can do one of 2 things. You can stamp in pigment ink, which will actually help the ink stay wet longer and it will catch the embossing powder. Or if you're using dye inks like Catherine Pooler's, you have to be really, really quick. So once you stamp it, within a couple of seconds, pour the embossing powder directly on top, and then you'll be able to get it to stick as well. But I don't like to take my chances, so I always do this extra step of stamping with embossing ink so that I can ensure that my embossing powder is going to stamp directly go over top and stick. So I'm grabbing a just random sheet of lined paper and to act as my funnel, and I'm using some Icicle embossing powder, which is a clear embossing powder. Any clear embossing powder will do in regular or super fine or ultra fine, whichever one you have, it doesn't matter. And you're going to take off the embossing powder now and heat it with a heat tool. When using your heat tool, be sure to heat it up for about 45 to 60 seconds before applying it to paper to avoid warpage. I didn't follow my own advice and my paper warped a little bit, but it's nothing too significant. I'm now going to use some purple tape here to attach my stencil. So I'm actually putting some purple tape sticky side up on my background side. So the way it is right now, the sticky side of the tape is facing up. And then I'm going to place 2 pieces on my stencil, and so I'm going to literally attach the paper to the stencil and the stencil to my glass mat at the same time. I'm now going to grab my brushes from Tailored Expressions. These are the blender brushes, and I'm going to use some inks to ink up certain areas. I found that there was enough space in between the hearts that I was able to do this freehand without adding any tape to protect any of the areas. If you're a little bit worried, then go ahead and add some tape, like purple tape or washi tape, so you can mask off the area. But I'm using a couple of different inks here, Limoncello, Flirty Fuchsia, and Samba, and I've now colored in my stamps. And so what's really cool about this is is that I was able to stamp my background in one color, or three colors in this case, and then I was able to color in the areas without it affecting the color of the outline of the stamp. So if I stamped an area in purple, for example, like at the bottom, I was able to, stamp in yellow over top and not make a muddy brown color. And you could go ahead and grab your die cut and cut all these out and use these for embellishments if you'd like, but I wanted to keep this as one solid background since I thought it looked really cool. So I grabbed the Shot Through the Heart dies from Tailored Expressions and some black cardstock, and I'm going to cut out 3 of these dies here. So what they are a handwritten sentiment that have the arrow through them, almost like an arrow through a heart. And I'm going to die cut these using my Gemini Junior die cutting machine. So once those came out of my die cutting machine, I started attaching them to the front of my card using some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive. Here it has a nice fine point. It also dries clear and matte, so if anything seeps out, it's not the end of the world if you get a little bit of a clump of glue on there like we always tend to do. So I added the 3 sentiments to the front of my card and called it a day. So I hope you enjoyed this card. You can see the outline of the stamped background image is so different from the inside colors, and it looks gorgeous. The next technique is using the cover plate die kind of as it is, and then using the remaining pieces to create other cards using embellishments. So I've gone ahead and I've stamped my background using black ink. I decided to do that off screen since I don't think it's really necessary to show. I'm once again going to create a blended background here, and I am going to use Samba, Party Dress, and Flirty Fuchsia. You can use these in any order you like. So for this card here, I switched it up a little bit, starting with Samba, Flirty Fuchsia in the middle, and Party Dress up top. Using the Tailored Expressions blending brushes again, I absolutely love these brushes for getting a nice smooth blend. You can see just how easy it is to get a smooth blend without getting harsh lines. And I like the fact that the handles are colors. They are super pretty, and I love them as an actual home decor piece in my craft room. But not only that, I never mix up my colors, obviously, because they're super easy to use. So to save on time, I just finished up my background off screen, and now I'm going to go in with my coordinating die cover plate here, and I'm going to put this over top. Now all of these hearts are now going to cut out as embellishments. So you can use, again, these stencil technique that we used before. If you wanted to clear emboss them and then color them using the different colors, you could do that. You can create a background like this one. You can white heat emboss and do an Emboss Resist technique, which I'm going to do later on in the video. It's completely up to you, but the cool thing is that these can act as embellishments, and then the background you can use for a separate card. So this is kind of like a 2-for-1 card technique in its own way. So I'm just going ahead and securing my die with some purple tape so it doesn't move going through my Gemini Junior die cutting machine, and I'm going to run it through the machine now. So I was able to easily take out all of those hearts. I'm going to set them off to the side for other cards, and I'm going to be using this frame here that I've now created. Now I'm going to add some liquid adhesive to my frame here. Just ensure that you're getting really all the edges here while you're going in, just so that nothing ends up lifting up. I'm using a pre-cut, pre-scored Nina Solar White card base from scrapbook.com. I'm running low on these after Christmas card making, and it makes me so sad that I might have to actually score and cut my own cardstock these days. Such a luxury I've become used to. So now it creates this really pretty background, as you can see. And then I was a little bit stumped on what to do with it. I was thinking to myself, I was thinking of actually putting in some hand-drawn smileys inside the hearts. I thought that would be kind of fun. But then I settled on something else. So I decided to die cut just a note out of black cardstock. This is a die, I believe, from the stamp market, but if that's not correct, I'll correct it in the video description below. And I added some of these on the front of the card. I needed something really bold to stand out from that bold background and all that white space, so black was definitely the way to go. I then went ahead with this sparkle glitter pen from scrapbook.com, and I added some sparkle on top of the sentiment. Now, if you notice your sparkles are not coming out very well, all you need to do is squeeze the barrel of the pen and more glitter will come out. But as you can see, I hovered over my glass mat rather than over my project when I did that, just in case a little too much came out and it seeped onto my project. I didn't want that. So each time I did that, I just went over my glass mat part, pushed down on the barrel, and then I was able to get more glitter coming out of it. It's a little hard to see on camera, but it looks really great when it's all finished. So here's a final look at our second technique here. We're going to move into the third technique now, and this is using some basic background embellished, I decided to call it, and this is a really basic card that pretty much anyone can make. So I am going in now and I am going to go ahead and stamp my background stamp here once again using black ink this time. Any black ink is completely fine. And I'm using black ink from scrapbook.com, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the background on some white cardstock. I just decided to put you in ultra speed there since I'm pretty sure you know how to stamp if you're watching one of my card making tutorials, and I've already shown it already. So now that that's all finished, I'm going to be grabbing some of those hearts that I had got cut out from my last card. So I'm once again just kind of reusing that so they don't go to waste. So I went ahead and I started adding those hearts onto my background, just kind of in a random order. I decided to do 3 lines of them in total diagonally, and all I did was search for the same ones that are stamped on the background in black and white, and I searched for their version in color. Now I wanted to ensure that my background, or my sentiments rather, were not going to get lost on my cardstock. So I cut a piece of vellum and I cut it out using a circle die, and then I added my little Be Mine sentiments here on top of the vellum. I used these on a previous card, the Shot Through the Heart dies. And for me, this was just a lot easier because I didn't want them to get lost in the busy background. So once again, I took my adhesive and very tediously glued these down.
Now I have a question for you. What is the one thing in crafting that you forget the most? I'd love to get some laughs in the comments, so please list them below. As you'll notice in the video, my thing always happens to be my intricate dies. Why I always forget to put some double-sided adhesive on the back of these before I die cut so it turns them into a sticker, I'll never know. I then end up sitting there for like 5-10 minutes trying to put like the most minimal amount of liquid glue on the back of these, and it just makes things so tedious. And every single time I think to myself, why didn't I use either stick-it paper or some double-sided adhesive from scrapbook.com and then die cut it with the adhesive on it? It would just make so much more sense. So what is the thing in the craft room that you find you always forget to do that would just make your life so much easier?
Now back to our card here after a little break. I decided to add some silver sequins to my card, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I glued down the vellum. So what I ended up doing was I added glue underneath the sentiments. And then what I did was for each sequin that I did, I had added a dot of glue underneath the vellum, between the vellum and the cardstock. And then I added a dot of glue on top of the vellum and added in a sequin. So that's how I was able to glue down my circle fully. I then decided to use some Passionate Pink cardstock from Gina K Designs, and I decided to use that as my frame. So I cut this to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then glued my card base that I created just on top of that and added it to a folding card base. I didn't have enough pink cardstock to just make a card base, so that's what I had to do. So again, I just put it on top of a white card base when it was all finished. So here is a final look at that card. It's probably my favorite out of all 5 that I created today, so I hope you enjoyed this one too. Let's go on to another technique.
Now, one thing that you can do, and it's so simple when something like this happens, is just add a small piece of vellum. So vellum is a great paper because it's not opaque, so you can see through it, so it doesn't take away from your background. But it makes your background subtle enough in a small area so that when you put the sentiments on top, you're able to really get the sentiment focus. So if you take a look at these 2 cards, you'll notice that in this card here, the sentiments are a little difficult to see and the background seems to be the focus. Whereas in this card here, it's got a similarly busy background, but you have your sentiments on top of vellum, which makes them easy to see. So why don't you give that a try on your next card?
So this is the Emboss Resist technique. This is a technique that's used so often in card making, but I never seem to get quite enough of it. So I'm going to be using my background stamp once again. I inked it up using some embossing ink from scrapbook.com, and then I stamped it on my surface.
Be sure to prep your surface with an embossing bag first if you have any issues with static in your area. I find it's really climate sensitive and it depends on how much you've touched the cardstock and stuff. I didn't use it for this one, but overall I do recommend it, just again to avoid those unnecessary mistakes. I added some Alabaster white embossing powder over top of my cardstock, and then when I lifted it up, I gave it a couple of little flicks on the back to get rid of any excess embossing powder. Off screen, I used my heat tool to melt that embossing powder, and then I went in and started blending over top of my background. I'm using the same 3 colors that I've been using throughout the whole video: Samba, Party Dress, and Flirty Fuchsia. So I'm going ahead and I'm doing my background. I started with Samba, continued on with Party Dress, and then at the bottom with Flirty Fuchsia. Don't forget that you can use a microfiber cloth when you're all finished just to buffer out the areas, and I find it really made a difference this time. Really got that white to shine through as there was some ink that had pooled over top. So once that was finished, I mounted it on top of a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. And then I'm going to make my sentiments. So I've shown the simple strips die on my channel a few times before, so I'm going to go very quickly through it. What essentially it is it's a group of sentiments. They're one complete background stamp that you can stamp in any color on any shade of cardstock, just like any other stamp. Now there is a coordinating die, and you can attach these using those 6 squares that were just stamped. Line them up and it cuts out all the sentiments at once for easy die cutting of many sentiments. These is really good for bulk cards. The nice thing about this is there are 2 sizes, the Simple Strips Mini and the regular size. And all Simple Strips stamps coordinate with the regular size ones, and all the Mini Simple Strip stamp coordinate with the mini version. And what's cool now is they have an asymmetrical one, so if you didn't like that the other ones were just a rectangle, these ones here have a little bit of a diagonal on them. So these are really, really convenient, and I always keep them in a little box in my craft drawer for all the leftovers, but you can just go ahead and see which ones you like and which ones you want to put on. I personally love to put multiple sentiments on cards, especially when cutting these ones out, so I decided to add 3 of them to the front of this card. It's a pretty simple card when it's all said and done, but overall, the white and colorful areas of this card make it just really stunning. Now here's a final look at this one here. Again, another one of my favorites from these techniques. I always love a good Emboss Resist technique. Now for my last technique today, I'm going to be doing some multicolored stamping, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of a few different things on this card. I tried out a few different things, and I'm not sure if it's my favorite card in the end, but I think the techniques are worth showing. So similar to the first card that we did, I'm going to go ahead and ink this up using the same 3 colors I've been using throughout the video, except for this time I didn't do any of the clear embossing powder over top. When that was all finished, I then added my stencil here to the front. Now, I was kind of thinking, what kind of things could I put on top? I was thinking about some glimmer paste maybe, or some texture paste, or something like that, but I didn't really have the colors appropriate for it right now because I'm still in the moving process. My craft supplies should arrive in about a month or so. And so I decided, why not use some Perfect Pearls? I haven't used them for a while, and so I needed to go over the stencil using some embossing ink. Now, if you're going to do this technique, make sure you press hard on your embossing ink pad just to ensure that it really goes through the stencil and gets enough on there. Now, once you've added the embossing ink on top or Versamark, then you can go with a dry paintbrush and just put some of this powder over top. Now, this is a really cool medium in its own way. I'm going to be doing a class on it pretty soon in my Technique Resource Binder class, which I have listed below if you haven't signed up yet. It's an amazing class, and you can sign up at any time. So it only sticks to the Versamark ink, even though it might look like it's sticking to my background. So you just add it on just similarly to what I'm doing, and if you have added enough embossing ink, it stays on there. You can see when I'm all finished that that wasn't quite the case with mine. And then you just get a clean brush or clean off your brush and go over top using some swiping motions, and it'll stay stuck to the embossing ink. All you need to do to make it set so that it doesn't come off on your fingers afterwards is give it a quick mist of water. That means very, very little. So I actually spray into the air, and then I kind of just flutter my cardstock through the mist, if that makes sense. So I don't spray it directly and get my cardstock all warped. I didn't care for the look of it. There just wasn't dark enough, mainly because I didn't add enough embossing ink. So I decided to add some of those embellishment hearts that I had from before. I also went ahead and added some of those sentiment strips that I had cut out earlier in the video. Again, no waste in this craft room in that sense. And I was pretty much finished with this card as well. So I hope you enjoyed these 5 different techniques. And thank you so much for watching today's video. I tried some new editing techniques, so I hope you enjoyed today's video and the different formats that I did. Let me know in the comments below if it's something that was your style.